Hello, everyone. Welcome to the certificate course on criminal psychology by Psychoshiksha.
We are going to cover and talk about how criminal psychology can be pursued as a career, what are its basic curriculum that you are going to study if you'll pursue it in your master. Now, when we talk about the definition of criminal psychology, also referred to as criminological psychology, is the study of views, thoughts, intention, actions, and reaction of criminals and all the partakers in the criminal behavior. Now, criminal psychology is that field of psychology where we as psychologists study the reason, action, thoughts, intention of why somebody has committed a crime. What made them to go and commit that very particular crime? Is there any kind of environmental problem? Was there any psychological distress in their life? What is the real problem that arises the criminal inside them? Because as a criminal psychologist, we always believe that nobody is a born criminal. We all born with a blank slate, and whatever society or the environment writes over it or make us write on it, we became the way in that very particular certain aspect. Now, as a science, criminal conduct is an approach to understanding the criminal behavior of an individual. So basically, if we consider, because psychology is a science, and if we consider criminal psychology as a subject, then we are understanding that what an individual who commits a crime think about, what goes in their mind. So we understand one, the ethical and humane application of systematical empirical methods of investigation. Now we in criminal psychology understands and stands on the part that whosoever has committed a crime, although they are wrong on their part, but we must give them a proper chance of investigation. No one should come in on the false grounds. Second, the construction of rational explanatory system. And we also emphasizes on the explanation of why somebody has committed a crime. We must understand the reason behind it, although the reason would not lessen everything, but sending them to rehabilitation center or giving them one more chance towards the society will definitely help them in certain ways. Professionally, psychology of criminal conduct involves the ethical application of psychological knowledge and methods of the practical task of predicting and influencing the likelihood of criminal behavior. And of course, all in all, as a criminal psychologist, the other job that we do is predicting on the basis of the present behavior of someone that will they ever commit a crime, what measures, how we can protect them as a society, as an individual, so that they are not harm to the society, rather a contribution to the society. People with this profession are also trying to find out why do people commit offense, what are their motives, what made them do so. The research of them to rob a bank in order to deal with financial problem. So yeah, I have been repeatedly telling you this, that criminal psychologist's main job is to understand the motive behind why certain crime is being committed, why they have done it, what made them do that, and if we send them to rehabilitation center, will any changes come up or not. Now we come up to the following functions that are supposed to be done by you if you are entering into a profession of a criminal psychologist. In 1981, one of the fathers of UK criminal psychology, Professor Leon Howard, described 4 ways that psychologists may perform upon being professionally involved in criminal proceeding. The following are: 1. Clinical. In this situation, the psychologist is involved in assessment of individual in order to provide a clinical judgment. This psychologist uses assessment tool, interview, or psychometric tools in order to aid in his or her assessment. We're going to determine how to process the individual in question. For example, help finding out whether she is capable to stand trials, or whether the individual has mental illness, which means he or she is unable to stand the proceedings. Now, one of the first uh, tasks that we perform as a criminal psychologist is the clinical aspect. In the clinical aspect, we basically assess the client, the criminal, the person who has committed a crime over a clinical procedures to diagnose them with a certain psychological distress, whether they are suffering from a disorder or not. This examination will also help us to know that whether our client is mentally ready to stand the trial and or they are not ready to stand the trial. And we are supposed to prepare a report. If we are working in a clinical setup, we are going to prepare a report and send it to the lawyer, and the lawyer will further take actions on it, that yes, whether my client can stand for these trials or he or she cannot stand for these trials. But always remember that this particular clinical assessment that we are only doing on a part of law and order. For example, we want them to, whether they can stand up the trials or not, our focus is only this much. Okay, we are here in this particular scenario are not emphasizing more on that yes, they are psychologically distressed and that's why they have committed a crime. Here, this is not the matter. The matter here is that we are assessing them to understand that whether they can stand the trials or not. Maybe when the crime was committed, what's what their state of mind right now was their state of mind. They could be two different things. Okay, so we are in this area only emphasizing that whether they can stand the trials or not. Coming to the second purpose of a criminal psychologist, that is experimental. In this case, the task of psychologist is to perform a research in order to inform a case. They can involve executing experimental tests for the purposes of illustrating a point or providing further information to courts. This may involve false memory, eyewitness credibility, experiments, and such. For example, this way questions similar to how likely would a witness see an object in 100 meters will be answered. Now, an experimental is that as a psychologist, we are going to perform certain tasks in order to find out that how this particular case can be resolved. Now, here, it's not only about a particular victim or a particular offender. We are emphasizing on all the area of how we can, work on a task, work on a case, that we are developing witnesses or we are developing the evidence in such a way that it works in the favor of a police as well as of the law and order of our country. So we'll understand that how somebody would have hit a person in certain angle that the injury has happened this way. Although these are the part of forensics, but a criminal psychologist also plays a slight role in it. Along with that, you can see the example that many a time this happens that we believe on eyewitness, but as a psychologist, we are not very supportive of eyewitness memory because it is believed that we fill in the blanks, the empty spaces. We as humans always fill up. So if you have seen something, some parts of the information will be covered up by you. Yes. Now, the third function that we do as a criminal psychologist are actuarial. Actuarial means depending upon or reading the stats or statistics to inform a case. For example, we will provide the information that how many times this particular client or this particular offender has committed a crime and what is the probability that they will commit the same crime in the future. Will they repeat the crime? Will they not repeat the crime? Will a rehabilitation techniques help them in becoming a better person or not? So these type of actuarial task is also a job of a criminal psychologist only. And last but not the least is advisory. Here, a psychologist may advise police about how to proceed with the investigation. For example, which is the best way to interview the individual, how best cross examine a vulnerable and another expert witness, how an offender will act after committing the offense. Now, here the advisory basically means that we give advice to the investigation team that how to proceed with it, what type of a question to be asked, so that we arrive on a proper conclusion. We'll understand more and more about that why somebody has committed a certain crime. But along with that, our job is not only limited to the people who are committing the crime, but also to the victims of it. If you have seen in India, there are no psychologists working in police stations, and many of the times police officers ask rape victim or acid attack survivors very vague question, or immediately after them they're asking them again and again these kind of a question, that how the rape happened, how all this happened, why somebody has thrown acid on you. They are already in a very vulnerable state, and policemen are not sensitive enough to understand these trivial issues nicely. Here again, a role of a criminal psychologist come in. We work with the victims, we understand where they go in, how to ask a question, how to sympathize with them, how to empathize with them. That's our key role. But unfortunately, in India, the hiring or the position in police stations is little less, but with time they are going to enhance, and with time they'll understand how important it is for the law and order to hire a criminal psychologist so that we can work with the victim and with the offender on a psychological level. Moving on, a slight concluding point here. Nowadays, as a society throughout the world is much more developed than about a century ago. Everyone agrees that fighting crime gets more and more sensitive, and it is not simply catch and imprison work anymore. Modern approach considers also that offender is a member of the society, and that after imprisonment they need rehabilitation. Since the main goal is not only to punish someone but to prevent them from recommitting a crime. Another very important point is taking care about witness and victims. Very often they might get serious stress, and is concern of police and psychologists to help them recover. Now, yes, earlier there was a viewpoint that we only need to catch and imprison. If you have committed a crime, it's death penalty, that's all. But now the view has changed. We do believe that, if somebody has committed a crime, second chance should be given to them or not, whether they should be sent for rehabilitation or not. What's the probability that they'll recommit a crime? How we can stop them from recommitting a crime? There are the various things that come through our mind. Along with that, it's not only the offender that we need to take care of. As a psychologist, we need to take care of the victim, and very importantly, the people who definitely get ignored here are our witness. Somebody who has witnessed a suicide must be under a lot of trauma. Somebody who has witnessed a scene of murder must be under a lot of trauma. Somebody who has witnessed a car accident can be under so much of trauma, but majority of the time our law and order system only revolves around offender and the victim. We ignore the witness until something intense has happened, and we only use this witness as a witness. We are not understanding them psychologically. It's also a job of a criminal psychologist to understand them, provide them with the help, and stand up for them that they also need assistance. We need to be present for them emotionally and psychologically. Moving on to the next part of this slide, after the definition and functions of criminal psychologist, we move in to the functions of criminal psychologist. The term of criminal psychology for most people may associate with Hollywood movies like Silence of Lambs. It's a very good movie that you can watch if you are really interested in criminal psychology or understanding in the psychology of criminals either ways. You can surely watch this movie. Along with that, there are a lot of Netflix series are coming up. For example, Mindhunters are there. Documentary on Jeffrey Dahmer can be watched up if you are interested in this field. And the criminal psychologist, as you might think, is the person who helps police to catch the offender, conducting interview with them and gaining a better insight into the offender's mind by talking to them about committed crime. Definitely, the way Hollywood movies has exhibited the role of a criminal psychologist, somehow very similar how practically it is happening, except some slightest of differences. Okay. So whenever you look yourself as a criminal psychologist, let me tell you, you will be not working directly at the crime scene. You will be working at the back end. You'll not be going to catch the offender. So no guns, no physical, strength is required. You are a psychologist and your mental strength is what police department or our law and order is required by. So you have to maintain files. Once the crime is done, once the crime is committed, or once the offender is caught, then file came to you to decide to send the person for rehabilitation, to enhance the punishment or to lessen the punishment, or whether the person can stand the trials or not, or how longer the trials will go on. So these type of assistance, these type of basic jobs that we do as a criminal psychologist, and of course apart from them, the testing, the counseling session for the offenders, having a good rejuvenating sessions for the offenders are also part of criminal psychologist. So the first function that we do as a criminal psychologist is profiling. Yes, criminal psychologists can be profilers, helping agencies create psychological profile to help apprehend suspects. Unlike what you see in TV, however, a psychologist is unlikely to go with the police to confront suspect, and a high-profile serial murderer only comes along once in a blue moon. Although a criminal psychologist may visit a crime scene, they are more likely to spend time in the office with case files and in record room poring over analysis of possible suspect. A large part of criminal psychology is looking over research and data relevant to cases. It can almost feel academic. Further, criminal profiling is only one possible aspect of their many duties. So as I told you that you will not be visiting the crime scene directly. Although they have written that sometimes we do visit, but in India it's slightly not happening. So because I have an experience of working in one of the prison with one of the superintendent of jail. So I know that how things are, and you will not be visiting the crime scene directly ever. You will be sitting in the record room, case will be discussed with you, analysis will be done, sometimes evidence will be given to you, but more or less your job starts in when your job starts once the investigation is done. Once the offender is caught, then you are preparing profile, then you are understanding that how the person is going to fight for the case or how we can protect him, what type of punishment should be given, the person is psychologically fit or not, what could be the potential reason, etc. The next task that we do as a criminal psychologist is assessment. Assessment here is another critical aspect of criminal psychology. Performing psychological testing to determine a suspect's state of mind is an integral part of education process. For instance, a psychologist may determine whether a suspect is in a stable mental state to stand trial, or if they have the personality characteristic to fit in the alleged crime. So you're going to do assessment with the help of various psychometric tools. You're going to apply, if you have RCI license, if you are having a clinical background with you, then you can surely apply MBTI, Rorschach, thematic apperception test. If you are not qualified to apply these kind of a psychometric tests, then you can definitely tie up with a clinical psychologist, or you can hire a clinical psychologist to visit your prison so that the offender can get assessed on these particular areas. And whatever psychometric test you feel like is required for the assessment of our client to understand our client's state of mind, you can use it. Next role function that you play as a criminal psychologist is interviewing. In order to collect reliable and accurate information about the case, interviews is crucially important. The most important point about interviewing them is considering that each person needs different approach. For example, child who was an eyewitness of a crime can give very useful information, but because of the stress a child might have been through, psychologist has to be very careful while interviewing. Another example can be an offender who does not want to confess. Police and the criminal psychologist use his or her offender profile to determine the correct and productive approach. In many cases, the way the offender are interviewed determine will the police reach the confession from the offender or not. Yes, so interviewing play a very important role. As I told you previously also, that we interview the witness, we interview the offender, we interview the victim also. And we need to take care of each one of them. How you are interviewing, whether they are saying lie, whether they are saying the truth, or whether they are under stress, whether they have, suffer anything traumatic because of it. So we need to understand all aspects. Let me tell you one point here, that lie detector that previously was allowed to use are no longer used in the crime setup. You cannot use lie detectors because they can fool the lie detectors, and lie detectors believed to be little inhuman. So law do not consider it. But as a criminal psychologist, we are not going to play any mind games or any tactics, or we are not going to manipulate in a certain way. We just want to make them realize that you need to accept if you have done something so that the right help can given to you. Although the easier it is written, the more difficult it is. It's not that easy to let anybody confess that yes, they have committed a crime, except they are psychopaths or sociopaths. But otherwise, it's really difficult to let them admit it. But our job is more towards that yes, they have confessed that yes, they have committed a crime. How we can help them now? Okay, what's the future like there? What's they're doing inside the prison? How we are creating them as a good member of the society? Okay, other part that we do here in interviewing is interviewing the witness or the victim. Okay, the next function that we perform as a criminal psychologist are rehabilitation of the offender. The role of a criminal psychologist is not only helping the police to imprison someone. In most countries, the society and the government is concerned about the possibility of prisoners to re-socialize after they leave prison. To achieve this goal, government competent organ work with criminal psychologists and determine specific steps that can be taken to prevent the offenders from recommitting a crime, and on the other hand, to help them find their place in the society. So rehabilitation of the offender, basically for more countries, rehabilitation is a part of their journey in the prison. But in India, this is not how it is, because India is a widely populated country, and just like any other state or place, our prisons are equally overcrowded. And so is our rehabilitation centers. So what are the points that we focus in when we look for that yes, this particular person should go for rehab? First is the age. If the person is juvenile or young, we do believe that they have a further life to live up. Why to imprison them throughout their life? Definitely, if there's a serial killer, somebody has killed around 17, 18 people, then rehabilitation won't work here. But we surely examine them in various other departments. So what the serious or heinous crime they have done, the severity of the crime they have committed, this also determine whether the rehab will provide it to them or not. So we need to understand that life inside the prison should not be very difficult for them, because a lot of crime or a lot of bullying, a lot of teasing, a lot of negative behavior is exhibited inside the prison also. And there are a lot of people who have committed a crime in a urge of anger. They're that prepared. They are not mentally coming from that environment of goons or bloodshed, which they can experience inside the prison. So we as a criminal psychologist need to make sure that life inside the prison is not that harsh. Although it's more on the paper, practically the work or the establishment is little slow, but one day this is going to happen. Now last, work environment for criminal psychologist. Criminal psychologists may be employed in a number of settings. Some work as a private consultant. Some may be employed full-time in government, usually in law enforcement organs. Some of them prefer to work part-time at universities or educational facilities. To summarize, criminal psychologists may be worked in private practices, academic institutions, forensic hospitals, correctional facilities, psychiatric hospital, law enforcement organs, mental health centers. If you ask me to name a few where India organizations are hiring criminal psychologists, then National Commission for Women, National Commission for Women and Child, Child Development Department of India. Then, of course, prisons are hiring criminal psychologists. There are a lot of lawyers that are hiring or teaming up with criminal psychologists. High Court and Supreme Courts are hiring criminal psychologists, or even I would say counseling psychologists, just to name a few. If you have a knowledge of criminal psychology with you, your upper hand will be always there. So, yes. How does one become a criminal psychologist? First, you need to obtain an undergraduate degree, preferably in psychology. Next, you need to seek graduate education. Please note that criminal psychology is not recognized as an area of specialization by American Psychological Association. Because there are people, what they do graduation in psychology and then shift to masters in criminal psychology. A master in criminal psychology is not an acceptable master degree. It's come with the combination of another master's. So either you can do masters in psychology, then you can compile it with masters in criminal psychology, or you can always do masters in psychology then diploma in criminal psychology. There are various universities who are giving diplomas in criminal psychology that will lend you with good great job opportunities as well, and of course followed by doctorate degree. If you do PhD with a topic related to criminal psychology, that will work wonders and that will give you great work opportunity in India as well as in foreign land, because psychology is the subject of human psyche, understanding human mind and soul. So work environment in USA, Canada, India will be different for a criminal psychologist, but the base or the expectations or the awareness will more or less be similar. On this note, we'll end our class here. Thank you so much. See you in the next class.